Hi, this is Annette with a quick overview of the different work practices and reporting requirements that exist in the main processes within a conservation organisation. I'll look at the four key business processes and firstly what guides their practices, the system options available to them, and the types of reporting that come out of those processes. So starting with the people management process, the work practices in this area are guided by some fairly standard processes across all industries. HR processes have been evolving for as long as there's been businesses, so there's a long history of experience that has influenced practices here, and they continue to evolve through the collaborations amongst HR folks across all industries. In some areas, practices are governed by regulations, things like employment regulations, safety laws and the like. So generally the HR practices within an organisation are mandated. If you want to employ someone, then there's a process defining how you go about doing that. If you want to get paid, then you need to fill in a timesheet. All that sort of stuff is mandated. It's partly for regulatory and governance reasons, but it's also for efficiency reasons. The work of managers and the folks in the HR areas is made much more efficient by knowing what the process is and having support available to make it all work. In terms of systems, non-for-profits are not all that well served. There's big HR systems available for large companies, but they're generally too expensive for smaller not-for-profits. Some functions like payroll might be managed through a finance system, but others, like training records and the like, might need to be tracked manually through spreadsheets. But regardless of the system's limitations, there's an expectation that the HR folks will monitor and report quite regularly to internal management and the board, including standardised metrics that monitor performance against expectations, things like turnover, retention levels, recruitment rates, compensation levels against budget, all that sort of thing. Moving on to the fundraising process, the work practices in this area are not regulated as such, but they're fairly similar across most types of not-for-profit organisations in most sectors. It's helped a bit by the movement of fundraisers between sectors and organisations, and also by collaborations, things like the Fundraisers Institute that share knowledge and learnings. There's a significant external scrutiny, though, on the efficiency of fundraising operations by donors themselves, of course, and also by charity regulators and various rating agencies that collect and publish information about the organisation as a whole, but with an emphasis on the fundraising activities. The task of fundraising itself requires a lot of teamwork. Fundraisers within an organisation generally share information about opportunities and interactions with donors and record all this information in systems so that current and future fundraisers can access the details. So there's a sort of a peer compliance culture that makes them more successful working together than alone. In terms of systems, it's a fairly mature market. Every company needs a customer relationship system, so the non-profit space has been able to leverage the learnings from the commercial world to create donor management systems. And all non-profits, not just conservation ones, need a donor management system, so there's a sizable market out there that attracts technology suppliers. And non-profit management and boards just intuitively understand that you need a donor management system, and it's pretty easy to build a business case for investing in them because you can show that for the investment made that the process itself will be more efficient and more funding will result. So there's reasonably well invested in that area. In terms of reporting, the system support actually helps with regular reporting, things like standardised metrics around donor numbers relative to plan, funding received versus budget, the funding that's in the pipeline, all of that can be fairly well reported and monitored. And it can be reported at different levels and sliced in different ways through donor segments and rolled up from lower levels to show the total organisational picture. In terms of financial management, the process here, the folks in this area have got the most stringent work practices, with all processes needing to meet formal accounting standards and various regulations around how companies operate. And every year their work is checked through external audits, which carry a lot of weight with internal management and the board, and also with external donors and supporters. Consequently, the work practices here are mandated. If you want to run a project, then there's generally a process for getting a budget approved. If you want to spend money, then there's standard ways of getting invoices paid and records to be kept and the like. In terms of systems, this is fairly well served again. Every company, not just every not-for-profit, needs a finance system to efficiently manage their processes and provide all the information that's required. Reporting here is again, the most stringent of all probably, with expectations of monthly reports showing things like actual versus budget at various levels, explanations of any variances, performance of investments. All this is expected to be highly accurate, detailed, with the ability to view the high level but also drill down to the details at various levels. So turning now to the conservation space, the work practices here have traditionally been highly variable. The sector as a whole is relatively young compared to other processes, so projects have often been quite tailor-made and unique to each circumstance with little standardisation of process. It's a bit like master craftsmen all having their own way of finally crafting a piece of furniture. But in recent years, the main conservation NGOs have developed the open standards for the practice of conservation, pooling their experiences and developing a best practice process that helps to build robust conservation projects and adapt them based on the results being achieved so that the desired impact can actually be obtained. There's also a variety of other adaptive management processes of varying scopes that evolved in different areas. But regardless, this is all seen as relatively new, and there's often just voluntary compliance to any sort of standardised process. In terms of systems, the sector is fairly well served in terms of spatial systems because our needs here overlap with many other industries, so there's an active market for technology developers. So we get a variety of GIS systems available to us. The open standards itself is supported by the systems it's developed, so Marathi and Marathi Share, which manage the information developed through the process and offers significant efficiency improvements and better ability to report results of projects. But again, use here is usually voluntary, so there's still a lot of information managed manually in static documents and spreadsheets, and some of the larger organisations have the capacity to build their own systems. In terms of reporting, the requirements here are relatively loose. Reporting is generally based on descriptive commentary about planned or current projects, with perhaps some metrics on things like the number of projects underway or the activities being performed, but sadly relatively little quantification of the actual results being achieved relative to what was expected or to the investments being made. So hopefully this analysis has shown that there's different expectations being applied in different parts of an organisation, and that using the open standards and its supporting systems is a way to achieve the level of process efficiency that's just expected in other areas, and also to lift the regularity and the quality of reporting to provide some real insight to help organisations make their investment decisions and achieve the impact that they're aiming for.